Jesus is an amazing teacher. He doesn't do half measures. He goes way over. When he talks about loving your neighbor, turning the other cheek, going the extra mile. Somebody asks for your shirt, give them your cloak as well. Our Lord tells us to love our enemies. Jesus just goes way over. And what did he do? Jesus could have come, and St. Thomas Aquinas says he could have dropped one drop of blood on the earth. He could have shed one drop of blood and it would have saved us, because it has an infinite value. But he chose to be tortured and humiliated on the cross, to be hanging on the cross for everyone to see, that kind of utter humiliation. He chose that. This is the way God is. He's just way over, and he calls us to be that way too. He calls us to imitate him, to love our enemies even. So when he says, the scribe asks him, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus doesn't say, "Oh, just the guy next door, or the person you work with, or somebody you might meet on the street and say hello to." No. He goes into this long parable, and there's a lot of details here. This is how Jesus is asking us to act towards our neighbor. And don't act like the priest or the Levite who sees him and just kind of turns his nose up from this poor man who's suffering on the side of the road, going to die if he's not helped. And they walk on the other side, the opposite side of the street, as if he's unclean, as if he's dead, and I want to touch a dead corpse and become unclean. They didn't even check. And this is a priest and a Levite, somebody working in the temple. Imagine if a priest today, or a deacon today, would be equivalent to a Levite, not practicing charity, just ignoring those who are suffering. That's pretty horrible. It's a pretty horrible thing, but Jesus is sort of saying this is kind of sometimes typical. It's a dreadful thing, to preach and not put it into practice. This is what they were guilty of. We know the Pharisees were this way. They were hypocrites. Say one thing and don't do another. And then the Samaritan. Who's a Samaritan here? Samaritan is somebody who's like born in another religion, born in a heretical religion, born like a Protestant or a Muslim or a Jehovah's Witness or someone like that. And yet he had a good heart, and he was a good soul, and chose to obey his conscience and have compassion on this man. And what does he do? He sees him, and upon the sight he had compassion. That's the first thing. And then he approached the victim, and he took oil and wine, which I presume is his own oil and wine, binds his wound and bandages them himself. He doesn't call somebody else to do it. He does it himself. Lifts him on his own animal, takes him to an inn, and cares for him himself. The next day he takes out 2 silver coins, which is each coin is worth a day's wage. Today, imagine, what's a day's wage today? $150 maybe $300 worth he spends on this stranger. And if you spend more, it says to the innkeeper, if you spend more than what I have given you, I will repay you on my way back. So he says he's going to follow up on him too. Follow up. It's not just, I've done a good deed for my day. I've done a good deed for the day and I'm good. No, he follows up on the poor man. And Jesus says, which one of these, in your opinion, was neighbor to the robber's victim? It's not saying which one of these treated his neighbor well, saying which one of these was neighbor to the robber's victim. So the scribe asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus is saying, be a neighbor to your neighbor. Be a neighbor. Go and do likewise. This scribe was not even thinking of the Samaritans. He's thinking of your next day neighbor, or your fellow Israelite is my neighbor. And Jesus saying your neighbor is your enemy even, because the Samaritans were enemies to the Jews, to the Israelites. Samaritans were enemies. And this scribe wouldn't even say the word Samaritan. Oh, the one who treated him with mercy wouldn't even say the word Samaritan. So Jesus is really teaching him a lesson. And this scribe was not a friend of Jesus. He went there to test him, went to test Jesus, and Jesus is giving him this huge lesson. Go and do likewise. It's not like that's your neighbor. Jesus is saying, go and do likewise. Put it into practice. He said that even after the scribe said, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and being and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, do this. Don't just say it. Do this, and you will live. So Jesus is saying, put into practice. Be charitable. Don't, put it into practice. Do things. Get your hands dirty. Help people yourself. Don't just give money or tell other people to do it. Do it yourself. And isn't that what Jesus did? Jesus is the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan. He's the one that comes here and looks upon us with mercy, with compassion. Jesus looks on us with compassion, and so he comes to earth. He comes and becomes a man. He gets his hands dirty. He becomes one of us in all things but sin. And he comes and takes care of us. He cares for us. He teaches us the way to life, the way that gives us the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. Shows us how to live. Shows us all these things, and then he dies for us. And then he builds his church, which is the inn. The inn. He brings us to the inn, the hospital of the church, and cares for us with the sacraments, cares for us with the Eucharist, with the other sacraments, confession. He cares for us. Jesus is the real, true Good Samaritan, and he is still the Good Samaritan. He still helps us on a day-to-day basis through the Eucharist and through our prayers to him. And we have to be like him. We have to put into practice what Jesus is saying. Think of the missionaries of charity. Look at the corporal works of mercy that they do. Mother Teresa would tell many stories. One of them was she went to a little hut where a man was living, and he had a lamp in the corner. It was all dusty and covered with things, and she said, "Why don't you turn that on? Put some light in here. Get some light in your little house. Would be happier." He said, "Well, I don't have anybody to visit me. I don't have any guests, so there's no use." And she said, "Well, what if I come and visit you regularly? Will you turn it on then?" He said, "Sure." So he turned it on, and she kept visiting him, kept regularly visiting him, followed up on the needs of this man, and he kept it lit for her sisters. I think of a woman that I know, and she would see homeless people or somebody in pain, and somebody who looked down, trodden, and would have compassion, would go over to the person, sort of bend down and look them in the eyes and talk to them, listen to them, find out what they needed, sometimes financially help them, sometimes materially help them, and comfort them and make them happy. And then she would find out their name and how to contact them and follow up on them, just like this Good Samaritan. That's what this woman used to do. This woman told me that she had many charges that she would take care of, especially the elderly, and she would constantly check on them until they died or until they moved. An example, Saint Dominic used to go visit the visit the elderly as well. And he used to enjoy seeing them so much. He kind of joked, saying, "I don't think God's going to reward me for visiting these downtrodden people because I enjoy it so much." So we have to think about our own life and see how we are practicing this kind of charity, these kind of corporal works, and we're looking upon our neighbor with compassion and seeing to their needs personally.
Fructum ventris tui,